Okay, so we are up to the new parak. We're up to the new Mishnah. Baruch Hashem. A very nice Yevamos parak. Okay, let's see the Hiliga Mishnah. Habo al Yevamto. If somebody is bo on his Yevam, we should never have such a thing. You should never need Yevam, but if someone's bo Yevamto, Bein b'shoigig, Bein b'mezid, Bein b'shoigig. That's a very good question. So let's see Rashi. What does shoigig mean? Kisover sheyishtoi, he thought it was his wife, or he thought it was some other woman, Isha Cheres. And it turned out that it was his Yevama. So he didn't realize that the woman he was with was actually his Yevama. I'm sorry?
It's a hard concept for us to understand these days, but in those days when it was so dark.
Correct.
It was such a dark.
Like what happened with Yaakov and Leah. That's right.
But it Rashi says he was not Tzatske, Isha Cheres. He thought it was some other lady.
Yeah, but who said he's a Tzatske? He was sleeping around and he didn't realize Pinta was his Yevama. Pinta was his Yevama.
I mean, up until now we were talking about the Biki.
Ruben, Shimon, right?
Okay, what does B'mezid mean? Mezid is worse. It's l'shem nus v'lo l'shem mitzvah. What if he knew he was with his Yevama, but he had no intent of doing it l'shem mitzvah? He did it b'daf l'shem nus. Ba'onis, he was forced, or b'rotten if it was willingly. The question is, what does willingly mean over here? So willingly can mean l'shem shemaim, doing it properly. Tosfos is going to ask, so what's the chiddush of that? So we'll see Tosfos in a second. I just want to finish the rest of the options. Afilu who shoygig v'hi mezida, even if he's shoygig and she's mezid, or who made it he shoygeges, or who anus v'hi loy anusa, he's forced and she's not, or he anusa v'hu loy anus. Either one of these configurations will work. Let's see Tosfos, the very top Tosfos, very interesting Tosfos. Habal yivimta ben b'shoygig ben mezid. Equal meimer the mezid v'rotain trei gavni minu. The rotten hainu, the machavan mitzvah. Rotten might mean that he's doing it with the proper intention. I avagav the pshita. Who, even though it's positive, if he's doing it l'shem mitzvah, of course it's going to be a good yibam. But katani lei the hachi yuchei b'chol dochta. Anytime the Mishnah lists off that something can be done, it says bein ben barotin. It's a normal figure of speech how the Mishnah speaks, even though the barotin is the textbook case, how it's supposed to be done. Based about Akama, it says whether he damaged somebody's shagging or amazing. It also goes through this list. Over there, it's kasha ma ben mezid l'rotzen. Here, when you're talking about a mitzvah, you could say l'rotzen means you did it l'shem mitzvah. But when you're talking about something being mazak somebody, what would be the difference between mezid and rotzen? So Tosfos there, I'm going to have to come up with an alternative shot in what rotzen means. Maybe we can use that shot for here as well. Whether or not he was willingly doing the biyah, but he thought either that it was a different woman or he was doing it l'shem's nos, or ba'onis means shen ansei lasis kain, or if they forced her. If it was Barotzen, where he did it willingly, but he either did it b'mezid or he did it b'shoy. What about who honest he loy anusa? Frank Tosfos a pasha akasha. Tema. The havalela minkat shnayim anusam. Davar buset fei. Why didn't the Mishnah also include a case that it's a good yibam even if they're both forced? Why does the Mishnah only discuss if one's forced? The Shlomer the agav the nakat bereisha. Who shall be b'mezida? Nakat nami hacha who honors v'hiloy anusa. It's just using a parallel lashon to what it used earlier. Inami loika amar. It doesn't mean v'hiloy anusa ela baratay. It doesn't mean when it says v'hiloy anusa. It doesn't mean that she was doing it baratay with the proper kavana. Ela he loy anusa avamazida. Maybe when the Mishnah says that she's not anusa, maybe it means that she's mezida, meaning she's doing it with a kavanah l'shem's nus. So both parties are doing it without the right kavanah. or shegegas, or she thinks it's somebody else. The hashtat her value loy mechavne l'shem mitzvah. So it is possible to understand that the Mishnah's case is in fact a case where neither one was mechaven l'shem mitzvah. Okay, beautiful. Let's see the continuation of the Mishnah. Until now, we were speaking about the kavana during the biyah. Now we're going to speak about the actual biyah itself. Echad hama'ara, sai, someone who only lets his atara goes in. I think it's called. They told me last night it's called the corona. If only the corona, it doesn't mean a beer. If only the corona goes in, that's called. That's enough of a biyah to make yibum. V'echad hagoymer, or even if he completely goes in with his aver completely. And we learned that hara, which means only puts in the atara, that cannot lead to a pregnancy. Okay? The echad amar v'echad hagoymer kana v'lo chilek ben biyah lebiyah, and there's no difference between one biyah or another biyah. What does that mean? Zok Rashi. The chilek ben biyah lebiyah is ben kedarka l'shaloi kedarka. Even a biyah of shaloi kedarka will be koina yevam. Ubein hara l'gmar biyah. Once we're teaching you about what it is considered a biyah, and we're saying that even shaloi kedarka is a biyah, even hara is a biyah, this applies as well to all the araisha b'torah, which means if someone is over, if someone's over arayis, it's even with hara as well. Or psulos, or if someone has biyah with a psula, going almana l'kain gadol, or grusha v'chalutza l'kain hedyet, it would passel them. Mamzeres u'nesina liyisrael, vas Yisrael l'mamzu l'sin, l'gabi getting malchus, passel over the chilik ben biyah l'biyah. It doesn't matter what type of biyah it is, the biyah will still result in the consequences that come from it.
Yes.
So in some cases, the woman becomes passel. In some cases, it's for the Isser Lav, some place for the Isser Karis. Either way, the hara will trigger that Isser.
Yosy.
Yes.
So I don't know if it's a biyah shaloi kedarka and she can't get pregnant. So it's defeating the whole purpose of
It's not accomplishing what's intended to be done in the evil.
right.
The Gemara is going to bring psukim to show us that even a biyah that cannot lead to kiyum mifzera, even that will be considered a good evil. Rabbi Raza said over an interesting story about an unintentional biyah. It's not directly related, but it's an interesting story. So I'll just share it with you. I was listening to it as I was coming in. The Sefer Chassidim relates a story about somebody who was mechabed his father very much throughout his life. And his father said, just like you're mechabed me in my life very much, I want you also to be mechabed me very special after I pass away. And in what specific way do I want you to be mechabed me? I never want you to make a decision when you're angry. If you're angry and you have to make a decision, always sleep on it and don't do what your anger and your passion want you to do for at least one day. One day, this fellow left on a business trip, and he was on this business trip for years, maybe 5 years. He went away on a business trip. He went for a very long time, and he didn't know when he left that his wife was expecting. So he comes home. He comes home in the middle of the night. He surprises his wife in the middle of the night, and he hears in his bedroom there's someone in his wife's bed. And he opens the door, and there's a young boy kissing his wife. He freaked out, and he pulled out his sword, because he didn't have a gun in those days, and he was ready to do what Pinchas did to Zimri and Cosby. He was freaking out. And then he remembered that his father left him that final request that he shouldn't do anything in haste, in passion, he should sleep on it. So he calmed down and he didn't kill them. And then he heard his wife tell the boy who was in bed with her, if your father would have known that he had a son, he wouldn't have went away for so long. And he said, "Oy, thank you that I listened. I'm so grateful that I listened to my father and I calmed down, because if not, I would have murdered my own child." So that's the story. It's a pathetic story.
I would love to.
Send a letter to his wife for 5 years, the whole time he was away.
I'd love to leave my kids such instructions, but none of my kids don't have such things at all.
You have to understand, we learned the Gemara with Rav and Rav Nachman, when they went to a different city, they married somebody there temporarily. So, we don't know, we don't know if this was when he was returning to his first home, returning to a second home. No, we're not sure what's going on over here. Zok the Gemara weiter. My afilu. What does it mean? Afilu hu shagi v'himizida. Zok the Gemara. Loi mi boy kamar. The Mishnah is telling us a smaller chiddush than a greater chiddush. Loi mi boy hu shagi v'hika machavna l'mitzvah. It's poshut that if he was a shagi, but she was machavna l'shem mitzvah. Inami, or who makes it? He is doing it l'shem mitzvah. I'm sorry, he's doing it mezid l'shem znus. V'hika machavna l'mitzvah. It's poshut if at least one of them were machavna for the mitzvah, that it's going to be a good yibum. Even if they're both not interested in the mitzvah, they're both doing it for some other reason. Or who makes vishagegas, or a case of who makes vishagegas, and in each case the tarvayu loy kamachavna l'shem mitzvah, that neither party has kavan l'shem mitzvah. Afilu achi kan, nevertheless the yibum will be effective. Tani Rab Chia said, Afilu shneim shogegin, shneim azidim, shneim anusim. Rab Chia learned that even if they're both shogeg, they both thought they were with somebody else. Shneim azidim, they both knew what they were doing, but they had kavan l'shem znus. Or shneim anusim, they were both forced. How does someone come to doing a biyah ba'oinus? What is the practical case? What happened? If it's speaking where Goyim forced him to be Bala, that's not called Onus, because a male could never be forced to do znus. You know why? A person will not become erect to be able to do a biyah unless it's something that he's desiring. So that's even the Goyim are physically forcing you, it's not going to happen unless there's desire. So kum t'chayis, it's not shach t'avanonius, at least to force a man.
But the Gemara believes that there is no possible way to force a man. So there's all these stories.
Let's finish the Gemara. We're middle of a sentence, right? So let's finish the Gemara and see the Gemara finds in the finding a way. It must be that he was sleeping. While it was sleeping, his aver got hard, and that's where the goyim, and then when he was in that situation, maybe the goyim forced it. Maybe that's what happened. The problem is that doesn't work either, because Rabbi Yehuda said, "Yoshan loy kana b'yavim." If someone is sleeping, he's not even kind by a yavam. So even though, no matter what he did, even if amazing, even though all those are good yibum, sleeping, everybody agrees, wouldn't be a good yibum. Why? The Yoshin lav bardas, he's not even a bardas. It's not because he's a bardas, but he didn't have the right das, like by Mazin. He's not even a bardas when he's sleeping, and therefore we'll have a kinyan and kinyan. So you think that's what should be worse? But it's not a bia. The problem is not a bia. But Rashi says more than that. We'll have a kinyan and a kinyan. A sleeping person's kinyan is not a kinyan. He's like, we look at him like he's a cotton, I guess. So what was the case? Ela beniska. It must be, Rashi says, a very interesting case, not likely to happen every single day, but beniska, which means in the skashali ishtay, he was doing something with his wife, and he was expecting to be with his wife. Let's say they were on a balcony, and they're doing it on a balcony, and the guardrail of the balcony was old. The landlord should have replaced it a long time ago, and it fell through, and he falls down, and he's going straight down, and he's niskashet, and maybe there's the Yevamos is lying out by on her beach chair. She's lying out by the pool, and all of a sudden, bang! He falls on her, and this could be a vampire. So could be that's how it happened. It's called ye boom, right? Because it happens ever so suddenly.
He stayed to his gosh as he was falling up.
So, and he's there, he went on in that fear, that matzah of fear as he's falling, how he stayed in the kasha. I don't know, but that's what the Gemara wants to suggest happens. Frank the Gemara, that's not either so practical. Why? Because Frank the Gemara, Rabba said in a case of mazik, Nava Munagag, what happens if someone falls off a roof, Veniska, and he crashes down on something or someone and causes damage? Chayiv. Because like we learned earlier in Toysus, so when it comes to Nezikin, a person's chayiv being onions, being rosin, being shoyi, in all accounts, a person is responsible for damages that he causes. Adam muad lo'il. So Nava Munagag, Veniska chayiv bar bodvar. But Rabbi said, in such a case, he wouldn't be kohen either. And once again, Rashi says the reason for that is on the first skinny line of Rashi, because he didn't have kavanah to do biyah at all. Ella, so what would have to be the case? He wanted to be mizdabek with his wife, and that's why he became hard. And then his Yevama came quickly into the bedroom, pushed his wife out of bed, jumped in, ubala. So that could be a case where he was honest. So Frank the Gemara, okay, very good. That maybe explains the case of the Mishnah. But Reb Chia had a case that was even more unlikely. And that was Shnei Manusim. How are you going to have that?
How do you have that he did notice when she pushes his wife out of bed? He knows what's going on.
I guess it happened fast that he couldn't control it. I don't know exactly the Metzias.
Oh,
Okay. Or the Reb Chia. So how do you have the Shnei Manusim of the Reb Chia? We just learned it right after the Mishnah. The Reb Chia also suggested a case of Shnei Manusim. Hechadam will be the case. So if the Gemara could go into Nischavin le'ishtoi, he was Nischavin le'ishtoi, so he became Niskasha. And then Goyim came and grabbed him and grabbed the Yevama, and forced them together, ubala, and that's how the bia occurred. These are all methods you probably shouldn't try at home. How do we know, in fact, so this is going to speak to Dubi's question, how do you know that all these types of yibums, these inadvertent yibums, how do we know that they're kind of yibum? So, the Tani Rabban. It says in the pasuk, Yevama Yavai Alel. From there we learn mitzvah, that it's a mitzvah to do. And I believe Rashi says over here that it's a mitzvah, Bibia Yoshimi Bechalitza. The Iker mitzvah is to do yibum, not chalitza, not like Abashol. Dover Acher, there's another approach as to how to interpret the word Yevama Yavai Alel. That is what we're learning from our Mishnah. Bein b'shoigig, bein b'mezid, bein b'oinus, bein b'rotzen. Yevama Yavai Alel. In any way that it happens, it's going to be a valid yibum. Frank the Gemara, how could you say Yevama Yavai Alel tells you bein b'shoigig, bein b'mezid, bein b'oinus, bein b'rotzen? If just a moment ago you just said that Yevama Yavai Alel teaches you that there's a mitzvah to do yibum. V'afik to the mitzvah. So Gemara, no, really the mitzvah you know from a different part of the parsha of yibum, where it says v'im lo yachboi tzaish. If a person doesn't want to do the mitzvah of yibum, then he could do chalitza. But if he want, it's a mitzvah to do yibum. So Rashi hachavetz mitzvah yibum. So from im lo yachboi tzaish is where we learn that there's a mitzvah to yibum. So Yevama Yavai Alel is still free and available to teach us bein ba'onis bein barat.
Doesn't chafetz mean he wants?
I'm sorry?
The chafetz yachbetz means he wants. So if he's an einus or he's all that, and he doesn't really want.
That's correct. Because from the im lo yachbetz, we're not learning bein ba'onis bein barat. From the im lo yachbetz, we're learning that there's a mitzvah to do yibum rather than chalitza. From Yevama Yavai Alel, we're going to learn bein ba'onis bein barat. So let's see what the Gemara says. The Tanya Yevama Yavai Alel kedarka. When it says Yevama Yavai Alel, it means the normal way of doing bia, and that's bia kedarka. The lakacha, then the lakacha the isha. The lakacha, we learn from there that it even means shaloi kedarka, taking her in any way, even if it's shaloi kedarka. And Rashi says the lakacha shaloi kedarka the rabbis to include shimba aleh shaloi kedarka kana. So Duvi asked if these type of bias will not lead to a pregnancy, why would they be effective for yibum? The answer is because you have a pasuk that says ulakacha. So even though the purpose of Yibam is to lahakam shem lachit, a bia at the end of the day, even shaloi kedarka will create a Yibam. Then it says the Yibma, but we're darshaning we're dashing part of the word of the Yibma. The Yavim, we learn Bia Goymeresba, then Kesav Shtar Goymamba. How is one Konya Yavama? One is Konya Yavama only through Bia, not through the classic ways of doing Kedushin, which is Kesav Shtar. And then the Yibma, from the Yibma part, we learn Balkarcha, even if she's not interested, that he still does Yibma. Amar Mar. I believe that's what it says in the Aleph. Amar, Bavar Achar, Yevama Yavay Aleh. So we're going back to analyze. The Yevama Yavay Aleh. Ben B'Shagi Ben B'Meis. Frek the Gemara. V'Afikta L'Chadarka. We later on in the Brisa we learned from Yevama Yavay Aleh to teach us a Bia Kadarka. So how can you use it to tell you Ben Shagi Ben Meis? It seems like we're learning too many things out of this Yavam. Zak Gemara, Bia Kedarka, you know where I know that from? Ahumi lahakim la'achav shem nafka. It says in the parsha of Yibam that he's doing Yibam lahakim la'achav shem. So the type of Bia that can possibly create a child to continue the name of his brother is clearly a makim shemakim shem. That's referring to a Bia Kedarka, which is a place where it's possible that you can have a Zerah Shal Kayama. And Lukacha will be used to tell you Shaloi Kedarka, but the Yibma we can still use, the Yevama Yavay Aleh we still use to teach us Bein B'Mezid, Bein B'Aynis, Bein B'Rat, Bein B'Shog, Bein B'Rat. The Chiyas Akra is Bein B'Shog, Bein B'Mezid, Bein B'Aynis, Bein B'Rat. So now we have a pasuk to learn out all of the different details that we need for. So from Yevama Yavay Aleh we learn Bein B'Aynis, Bein B'Rat. We know the mitzvahs, the ikar to do yibam and not chalitzas by imla yachpoitz, and we know from l'hakam l'chav shem that a bia kedarka works for yibam, and the lekacha teaches you that even a bia shaloi kedarka works for you. Gufa, Dr. Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda. We said earlier on the daf, at the top of the line, at the top line, Amar Rav Yehuda yashen like kana biyavim. If someone's sleeping, that would not be kana. If he did bia while he was sleeping, that would not be kana. The Amar crop, because the pasuk says Yevama Yavay Aleh. Once again, the same pasuk. We're really once again dealing with the conflict of learning multiple things out of those words Yevama Yavay Aleh, and we learn from there Ad Mechaven La L'Shem Bia. From Yevama Yavay Aleh means there has to be a kavanah L'Shem Bia, not L'Shem Mitzvah, but L'Shem Bia. In fact, Gemara, but Latanya Ben Ar Ben Yasha. We have a brayso that says that even if he's sleeping, it's a good bia. So how could you say that if he's sleeping, it's not koina? So tomorrow, Ema bein ara bein yeshana. Maybe that brayso should be amended, and it's saying whether she's sleeping or whether she's awake, that's not relevant. The even would work, but he must be awake. Tomorrow, you can't answer that way because we have a brayso that lists them both in the same brayso. But Tanya bein ar who bein yashan who bein ara he bein yeshana he. So there's no way to get around it. There's a brayso that says black and white that he's kind of the Yevama and the Yibam works even though he's sleeping. So there's different types of sleeping. If he's really in a deep sleep, everybody agrees that the Yibam is not a Yibam. But the brayso that says if he's sleeping, it's still a good Yibam. That's not a full sleep. That's as adrimalasa. It's like a little bit of a sleep. Like someone sleeping when he's learning, right? Hechidami misnamnim. Amar Abashi, we had this many times. It's nim v'lay nim. He's sleeping, but he's not quite sleeping. Tir v'lay tir. He's awake, but he's not quite awake. How would you categorize that? You go into kari levani. If someone is like his head is bobbing, and you say yankel, what? So that's someone who's not really fully sleeping, because if he was really in a deep sleep, he wouldn't even hear you call his name. But when he answers you, if you ask him, where are your car keys? What? He wouldn't be able to answer. But if you say, Tati, are your car keys in your jacket pocket? Mitkar, he'll be able to say, yes, they're there. So he cannot give you a coherent answer, but if you give him the information, he'll be able to respond yes. So these are what Mustam is. So yesterday morning, my wife wakes up and she sees that my daughter's not home. So she was very, very nervous. So she finally gets a hold of my daughter. My daughter says, "Yeah, I slept by a friend." She said, "You can't just sleep by a friend and not tell anybody." So my daughter says, "What are you talking about? I told Tati, can I go sleep by my friend?" And he said, "Yes." I was sleeping on the couch.
How she doesn't count?
So I told my daughter, "La Hadam, I never heard you." She said, "What do you mean?" I asked her, "Tati, can I go to my friend?" So she said, "Yeah, sure." So there you go. That was I think that was not Misnaman, that was Yosh and Mamush.
We have a rule in our house that if there's no eye contact with confirmation, it doesn't count. Exactly for this reason.
It's a gewaltige policy.
We have another rule in our house. It doesn't count.
Okay. You know, my daughter is a smart girl. She knows that she can use that excuse to sleep over by her friend's house. But if she would have went and bought herself something with my credit card for $1,000, because Tati said yes, that much wouldn't fly. Okay. Zog to Gemara weiter. Gufa. Amar Rabba. Novel min Agag. Chaim Tzvi's favorite case. Novel min Agag beniska. If he falls off a gag and he smashes something, he damages something. Chai bar dvorim. Now we know when a person damages, there's 5 dvorim. Nezek, tsar, ripoy, sheves, and boishes. Nezek is the actual damage that was done. Tsar is pain and suffering. Ripoy is the cost of the doctors to make someone get healed. And sheves is his lost wages. Boishes is when someone is slapped around in public, it's a humiliating experience. So you have to pay money because you were a mavaza somebody. But if you fall off a roof, you're only chayiv in arbod varim, not in all 5 things. You're not mechuyev in boishes. The Gemara is going to explain. So the Gemara is going to explain. What are you mechuyev in? B'nezek, b'tzar, b'shebes, b'ripu. Aval boishes loy mechayiv. You're not chayiv to pay for his embarrassment. Why? Ain't chayiv ala boishes ad sheyischafim. Boishes, you're only mechuyev if you purposely intend to humiliate the person. If this happens by mistake, there's no chiyuv for boishes. Amar Rabba, what happens if nischavin latiach b'chayso? He decided that he wanted to check to see how strong the fence that he has around his house was. So he figured he'll push it with the hardest thing that he has. And Rashi says, "Lav mishum b'yim mechaven." He's just pushing against this fence with the hardest thing that he owns, to see how strong that fence is. And what happened was no offense. It was his Yevama. And it ended up being his Yevama, loikana. Why? Because it wasn't even a kavana of B at all. But what happens if he was a Hamas fighter and nischavan latiach bebehema, he wanted to do bia to a behema and biatiach biyavama because he couldn't really tell the difference between the two. So then kana, that would be considered a yibam, he would be kind of her. Because he was machaven for a bia. Someone who does hara, that's considered a bia. I just want to speak.
Sorry, it has like a shmek of a mitzvah hababa avera. Like he's trying to do an avera, and here he's doing a mitzvah.
Well, that's what the Mishra's case was. He thought he was doing znos. He thought he was being with another woman. So that's the whole point. As long as he had kavanah l'shem bia, it would be a good yibum. Yibum is an anomaly that even with a kavanah l'hepech.
Why isn't it?
Because it wasn't an avera. He ended up not being mizana with the vehema. So the mitzvah was by being with the Yevamos. I'm sorry?
Isn't there one that says mitzvah tzrichas kavana?
But not the mitzvah of Yibum. The mitzvah of Yibum is that's why it's an anomaly. You could be having kavana to be doing a maisus nus with a third party, and that would still be considered the mitzvah of Yibum. Yeah, it's a huge chiddush. Yeah, it's like a huge chiddush. Okay, I just wanted. There's a long taisvus here. That's a very interesting taisvus, and I just want to mention what it's about because it's an interesting fact that we don't have time to learn it. And that is, we know that there's an isser of Yaharg Bal Yavar. There's an isser of Yaharg Bal Yavar for a man to do znus. Would there be an isser or a mitzvah of Yaharg or Teharg be al Tavar? It doesn't say anywhere that if a woman is being forced to do an affair of Harayis, that she has to be Tehareg Bi'al Yeah, this is something that's discussed multiple times in Shas. It's discussed in Megillah, again, when Esther was Karka Olam. So the Gemara tells us that the Isha is Karka Olam, meaning if a woman is just lying there and not actively taking part in the Biyah, then it's not something that would be subject to Yahar Vayavar, because she's not actively part of the act. If she's being active and she is going to be luring him or seducing him because she's forced to with a gun to her head, then there might be a din of Tehar Valtava. But in the Karka Oilim situation, it's not even that. It's not
Is that actually in the Gemara in Megillah, or is it the Taisvis that says that?
It's the Tosfos there. I mean, the Gemara speaks about Karka Oilim, but there's a long Tosfos about the Allah of your, because what Tosfos starts off by saying is, if it wasn't for the fact that Ein Kishu Elul Ladas, then there wouldn't be an Isser for even a man to do this. You wouldn't say Yarg Vayavar, because he's not doing anything. The only reason why we say he's doing something, and therefore you say a Yarg Vayavar, is because Ein Kishu Elul Ladas. But by a woman, you don't have that problem, so therefore you might not say to Yarg Vayavar. That's what Tosfos talks about over here. It's like an interesting question. And if you remember, we once had a Shaila where there was a group of people that were captured by bandits, and one of the wives of one of the men seduced the head of the pack of robbers, and that's how she was able to help them all escape. And there was a Shaila if that was the right thing to do or not. So there, she wasn't just Karka Oilim, there she was a little bit more active. So let's see the Gemara back to Echad Amar Amar Ula. Minayin lahara min haTorah. How do you know that hara is recognized by the Torah as a proper biyah? Shenemar, it says Ish asher yishkav isha dava, man that has relations with a woman who's an ida, the gilas hervasa es mekoira hera. He did hara to her makar, to her privates, but he uses the word ha'ara. Mikan, we know from here. So the flagship case of hara being considered the Gemara Biyah is in the pasuk discussing the Isra of Nida. Zok Gemara Asher Chanida. So we know by Nida hara is forbidden, but how do we know by Shara Rayis Minayin? How do you know all the other Rayis hara is also considered like a Gemara Biyah? And if you're going to suggest just learn it from Nida, so I would say no. Nida might be unique, and maybe only Nida. We have this chumrah that even hara is going to be aser. Because mal nida shekain mitamba as bayala. Nida has a chumrah to it that no other one of their rais have. Is that the man who's bal nida becomes tamei just like the nida. There's no such thing as a man becoming tamei by any of the rais. So therefore, we cannot learn from nida to all their rais that hara is a good biyah. Learn it from the pasuk that discusses about the issur of marrying the wife of your brother. The pasuk says nidahi. The pasuk sticks in the word nidahi, describing this relationship of someone being with his sister-in-law. Is his brother's wife always a nida? Sometimes she's not a nida. So why do we say nidahi? Ela kenida. Rather, the Torah is trying to tell us the isra of eshesach is just like the isra of nida. Ma nida b'hara, just like nida, a hara is a violation. Af eshesach b'hara. Frank Gemara, you wouldn't know that. I couldn't learn it from Eshesach. Because Mal Eshesach, I can't learn from Eshesach to the rest of the Arayis because Shekain Biyadai the rabbis. It's possible to make many more Eshesachs. By my brother marrying more and more women, he can create more and more Eshesachs. So the Iboy Mekadesh Va'azal, because he could go and be Mekadesh as many women as he wants. So that's an erva that someone could make more of. Ki alpha, even up to 1,000. So therefore, you wouldn't be able to learn to other rights where it's limited. Only the Torah can create those, or it comes naturally. So let's learn it from the Isser of having relations with the sister of your father or the sister of your mother. You can't make more of your mother's sisters. You can't make more of your mother's brothers. Hera. So let's learn it from there. And there it also used the word hera, it uses the word of hara to tell you that hara is also like a gemar bia. So a gemara you can't learn from there either, because ikal mifrach malach chaysav achayseim they also have a chumrah. So you can iser habamei elo. Those are isurim that come by themselves. In other words, you don't make it through a kedushin. When you're born, those isurim are automatically over there. So Gemara, because of that, we can't learn from Nida alone to all the other arais. We can't learn from Eishes Ach to all the other arais. And we can't learn from Achoisav, Achoiseim to all the other arais. But maybe we could couple some of these together, and between the two of them, learn L'chol HaTorah Kula to all the arais. So therefore, how about Teisi Chada Mitarti? Let's take two of these three, put them together, and learn from there for all the rayas that are Razik Marbi. Which two should we pick as the leaders? Teisi me'eshes ach be'achois a be'achoiseim. Use the erba of eshes ach and the erba of either your aunt from your father or your aunt from your mother. That wouldn't be able to teach kol haTorah kula, because malahanach shekei isurin mishum she'er. These are isers because they're relations. But for instance, an Eshes Ish, Rashi says, which is an Isser that has nothing to do with a relation. It's because she's married. How do you know that by an Eshes Ish, Hara is also forbidden? Let's use Nida and the Erba of Achois Av and Achoiseim. And there, Nida is not She'er. So therefore, you wouldn't be able to learn even Eshes Ish. So tomorrow there's a special chumrah for these two. Malanach sheken isur abama elo. These are isurim that came by themselves. They're not made because his brother married somebody. So oy bazoi, you wouldn't necessarily be able to learn the L'chol HaTorah Kula. Alateisim min nida ve'eshesach. So yes, let's put together nida and eshesach. To my purpose, there's nothing that you can ask. You can't ask that it's mishum she'er because nida is not mishum she'er. You can't ask because it's an Isra Habama Elov, because Eishazach is not an Isra Habama Elov. So that with the combination of Nid and Eishazach, we know that by all the rayas, even Haras can marbia.
Yosy, how are we defining hara exactly?
If only the tip of the Aver goes in to her, but he doesn't completely go in all the way. So it's just the corona that goes inside.
Where does that term come from? What does that mean exactly?
I'm not sure what the word hara comes from. Okay, I know there's a lot of videos online that would probably illustrate these. I'm not sure if the Art Scroll has illustrations for this. Zok to Gemara, ma lenida ve'eshes ach. Maybe you don't have a raya from nida neishach either. Shekain ein lam heter b'chaya oisra. As long as the so Eishes ach will never be mutter when the ach is alive. But when the ach dies, there's a mitzvah vivum if he dies without children. Or a nida. While she's a nida, she's aser. But after she's a nida, she's going to be mutter. Timer basis ish. My second nesis ish. Even while the husband is alive, because the husband is the man who's making this woman aser, because he's the one who makes her into nesis ish. Even in his lifetime, she'll be mutter if he divorces her. So maybe since Eishes Ish is less chomer, you shouldn't be able to learn it from Nida and Eishesach. So now we're not answering that question yet. So right now we have a problem. How would you know an Eishes Ish is Asher Bara from Nida and Eishesach? Maybe Eishes Ish is not as chomer because Eishes Ish, even in the lifetime of the man who made this woman Asher, it's possible that she would become mutter if he gave her a get. But now we're going to just take a small detour. Are you telling me, are you telling me that after the life of the person or the reason for the Isser, so after the life of a Nida, meaning when she's Ois Nida, or after the life of the brother, it's going to be mutter? Aval achem kan yesh lam heter. Nida b'yoyim Italia milsa. Nida Italian days, which means afilu im mesa oisra. Even if the cost for her becoming a nida stops, meaning shepaska dam, b'ri rishona, even if she saw dam only once, she's still usher for 7 days, right? The nida is also for 7 days regardless. We're talking about nida da'iraisa, which doesn't need shiva nekiyah, right? You need 7 days. So there you see, it's not totally in the chaya oisra. It's totally in something else. B'yoyim Italia milsa. And eishesach, it's bebanim talia rachmana. If there's children there, even after the brother dies, there'll be no mitzvah, or there'll still be an issur b'eishesach. So the wording of your kasha is a little bit difficult. Ela parachachi. This is what you can ask. Mala nida b'eishesach. You cannot learn from nida b'eishesach to eishesish because she came in oisran matirin. By nida and eishesach, what makes them osir doesn't make them mutter. And Rashi says what that means is that in koyach ba'oisir lahatir. The dam doesn't have the koyach to be matir this woman, and the brother doesn't have the koyach to be matir this woman. Something completely different, a completely external factor is matir this relationship. By yibom it's yomim, and by eshes ach it's him dying without children. Timer by eshes is she'oisir matira. By eshes is the very person that made her usher has within his own power to make her mutter by giving her a get. So once again, we're stuck now. How do you know that all arise, in this case, Ashes is, how do you know that all arise with hara alone is going to be an issue? It says in the pasuk, this is a pasuk that compares all of the arayas in one umbrella. And I think it's in this week's parsha. It's in Achremois, or maybe it's Kedoshim. Kichol, I'm sorry? That's right. Kichol asher yaseh. So you see here, all of the arayis are compared to each other, including nida, and therefore we can say manida bahara avkol bara. So now we have a general hekesh. Once you know a halacha by one of the arayis, you automatically know it by all the arayis. So now we have a couple of psukim where it said hara, by nida said hara, and by eshzach said hara. I'm sorry, by Nida said Ara, and by Chais Av and Chaisem it said Ara, and by Eshesach it said Nida. So now we have these extra words. We were originally using those words to spread the message that Ara is Marbia. Now we don't need those anymore. Now we have to figure out what those words are for. Why did it say the word Nida by Eshesach if you don't need it to teach you that Hara is Marbia, because we know it from the general Hakish? So Kamar Lechad Rav Huna, Remez Liyevama Minatayr Minayin. Where do you find the entire remez to Yibam? Why do we need a remez for it? Haksiv Yevama Yava Yala. There's a whole parsha that talks about it. What do you mean remez? Ela remez liyevama she'asura b'chayebai leminayin. Where do we have a remez to tell us that your sister-in-law is also for you to marry, even if your brother divorced her? In Gir Shachim, even if your brother divorced her, where do we have a remez that that's also? Zok Gemara minayin. Hi Svari, it's a Svara. The Torah tells us, the Torah tells us that only after her husband dies without children, only then will it be mutter to marry your sister-in-law. Mechalal, wouldn't that teach you the Bechaya Baila Surah, that while he's alive, even if he gives her a get, she'll still always be usher to you. So why do I need a remiss for that? Maybe what the pasuk is telling you, that after her husband dies without children, then it's a special mitzvah for you to marry your sister-in-law. But if your brother divorces her, but your brother's still alive, who said it's usher? Maybe it's rishus. Maybe you have the option to marry her if you want, but there's no isser. Inami, or maybe you might say in, or you could even make a diak like what you're saying is that it's only mutter to marry her after he dies without children, but while he's alive, it would be usher. But that's only a diak, and that's a lav. Say it's only an assay. Where do you know that it's an Israel lav? For that it says, Amar Kra, the Isha Shayikach as Ashes Achav Nidahi. That's why the Torah specifies by the parsha of Ashes Ach that it's like a Nida. V'chi Ashes Achav Nidahi, who said she's a Nida? Elakinida, we look at the Isser just like an Isser Nida. Manida Avapi Sheesh Laheter La'achem Mikan Nevertheless, the Shasi Surah is the chorus. During the Isser, meaning before he dies without children, is an Isser chorus. Af Eshes Achnami, so to the Isser of Eshes Ach, Af Apishiesh Laheter Laachmi Kan, even though they will be a heter later on, if he dies, nevertheless, B'chaye Baila B'karis. So now at least we explained why it uses the word Nidahi by the pasuk of Eshes Ach. We will still have to explain why it uses the word Hara by Achoisav and Achoiseim, and that will lead for Shabbos, and we'll be mamshech from here on Shabbos.